The Scenic Route. We Tarnished consider more than just blue waters and blue skies when we talk about places of interest. We also think of places with good items and an abundance of runes. Hello everyone, this is the Seeker of Grace, and welcome to the first episode of The Scenic Route. In this series, I suggest optional areas in the lands between that you might want to visit, as well as what you might want to do there. Of course, there are many of such places with lots of good items to find, so I will focus on the more obscure areas, those that deviate greatly from quest lines or main objectives. So, in this episode, I will be talking about the Cave of Knowledge. Wait, isn't that a tutorial dungeon which all newbies should visit? Well, one could easily argue for its importance. Nonetheless, I want to talk about this place and add a twist to it by addressing a question. How important is it for a newbie to visit the Cave of Knowledge? You might have noticed that I skipped the Cave of Knowledge and went straight into the open world. Well, I would have broken many rules of this challenge if I had followed the dungeon's tutorials, but let's not immediately assume that this place is not worth visiting. First, let me give you a brief description of this place. The Cave of Knowledge is a medium-sized dungeon with special features designed to help new Tarnished learn basic fighting skills. Said features include the display of guides and hints in relevant situations, and the distribution of enemies across the dungeon into clear segments. This dungeon can be accessed by plunging into a hole found in the starting area. That is, the area you're sent to after your encounter with the Grafted Scion. There are no proper items to be found in this dungeon, but you are rewarded with enough runes to purchase some useful items. Now this is my analysis. The combat tutorials provided by the Cave of Knowledge are useful. The guides explain the intricacies of fighting quite well, and each segment of the dungeon gives you a clear objective, teaching you the best techniques to use in specific situations. The runes you obtain also help you in your transition to the next tutorial. But are the skills taught here truly of any use for the newbies? Herein lies the fundamental problem. The combat system in Elden Ring is quite complicated, and if Joe is any indication, saying that newbies will struggle to assimilate all this information is an understatement. So I might have advised Joe to visit the Cave of Knowledge at some point, and this was what he had to say about his experience. I never realized that fighting enemies could be so complicated. There is too much to learn. I left the dungeon feeling more confused, and indeed, from my observations, the only thing he learned from all those tutorials is that jump attacks are very strong. And at last, it's finally time for my verdict. Considering the pros and cons that I mentioned, I would say that visiting the Cave of Knowledge is optional. In this dungeon, learning is its own reward. While it is true that the dungeon equips you with useful knowledge, if you're not learning anything, then your time is better spent exploring the rest of Limgrave. So, to be clear, if you're committed to learning how combat in Elden Ring works, then visiting the Cave of Knowledge will be useful for you. And I'm confident that with this mindset, you will become Elden Lord someday. But if the tutorials are confusing you, that's completely fine. You don't have to force yourself to understand them. I'm sure there are other ways to approach these trials, and these are exactly what I'm trying to find in my newbie challenge run, so be sure to follow it. In the meantime, if you find this guide helpful, then please click on the like and subscribe buttons. Alright, Thank you for watching, and stay tuned for the next episode of The Scenic Route.